What is up, everybody? So, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Sony ICF-7600D. Now, I think you can remember in the intro video I posted, there is the Texan PO990 and the Sony ICF-SW55. The reason I'm not doing a review on that Sony is because it's still having a couple of issues here and there. I'm guessing the PLL circuit's kind of wrong. I think I calibrated it incorrectly. I'm still trying to figure it out, and I also think there's some power supply issues. So, before I could get it to a state that I'm confident with showing it on the video, I'm not going to be doing a review on that radio just yet. So, let's take a look at the ICF-7600D instead, which is kind of its predecessor. It's one of the first radios in this form factor, like a small book-sized radio, to feature a full PLL radio with direct frequency entry. It's basically the first one of this size. Now, let's take a look at what it has to offer back in the early 80s. So, starting from the frequency range, it's FM and full coverage shortwave. The FM is a Japanese FM frequency, and the US FM frequency, 76 megahertz all the way to 108. The AM bands are long wave 153 all the way up to the shortwave 30 megahertz full coverage shortwave radio. So it has a pretty wide frequency range for something of this size, considering this is like the early 80s design. So at the back here, you'd see that it takes 6 AA's, 2 for the clock and backup computer for the memory, and 4 for the radio operation, like the amplifiers and the PLL circuit and all that. There's a little world time chart and your frequency band, little display of that. For easier tuning, there's this time set button, which you could use it to set the clocks. On the right side of the radio on top here, you got a fine tuning knob for SSB tuning. It acts as a beat frequency oscillator, or just regular fine tuning for the AM. Since the tuning using the manual tuning buttons go in an increment of 5 kilohertz, this would do the tuning in between the 5 kilohertz. There's also a normal mode, which completely ignores this fine tuning knob. Down here, you got a tone control and a volume control. On the other side here, you got a sensitivity switch for the external and internal antenna. Now, so something to say about this external antenna is I don't know if it supplies a 6-volt voltage coming out from that. I have not taken a look at the schematic of this unit just yet because it doesn't need any repairs. So I don't recommend, unless you know what you're doing, to use a wire antenna on this external antenna jack. This is I think a recorder remote control. It's like a tape deck remote. I am not certain if it acts as an auxiliary output, audio output. And you have a mono headphone jack and a DC in 6-volt power jack. In the front is your typical radio operation thing. You got a clock. It's a separate circuit from the radio with a standby button. I think it also turns on the radio, acts as an alarm clock or something like that. I'm not really certain, but yes, it has a standby button, and this is how you do to set the timer and the alarm, the time and the alarm. I'm not really certain if it has an alarm or not, since I've not completely read the manual yet. You have a sleep button. This is your power switch. With up here you will get a main power, which cuts off the power when you have it at the off position. It cuts off the power to all the PLL circuit and everything like that. All right. Down here is your direct entry keypad. This button is for entering the memory. There's only 10 memories in this radio. This is for your direct tuning entry controls. This is the button where you get to select different band of shortwave. If you hold it down, you'll be able to select different shortwave bands. All right, this is your automatic tuning. It scans through the bands. This is your manual tuning buttons. The speaker inside is a 3-inch half-watt speaker, typical of a Sony, like these. So that's basically what the features of this radio. Now let's move on to the pros and cons, what I like and what I don't like about this radio. So let's start from the things I like about this radio. Before I get into that, I have to tell you this is an awesome radio. I love it. Absolutely. So shout out to Sony. They did a really good job at making this thing. All right, let's get to it, shall we? So first thing I like about this is obviously its sensitivity. This is a very, very sensitive radio, comparable to the ICF-SW55 and obviously the Texan PL990. A great, great radio if you're just trying to cruise through the shortwave bands. Very, very sensitive. It pulls in all the weakest signals out there, and while sounding still really, really good. So that's the sensitivity I really like about on this radio. And also talking about tuning, I really love how this whole tuning operation works on this radio. The operational system on this thing, like the whole user interface and all that, is very, very good. Very, very good, to the point that it's almost as easy to use as, say, a modern, like say, a Sangean ATS-99X. I like it so much. The manual tuning always goes by 5 kilohertz. There's no step button or anything, which you don't really need, because if you want to go between, say, 2000 kilohertz and 2005 kilohertz, you use this fine tuning button to tune between them. So really good. It's actually really, really easy to use. Once I got used to it, I love it. And the direct entry is also straightforward. You hit the AM button, you key in the frequency. Same with the FM. Really, really straightforward. And saving the memories is also pretty straightforward. You hold down the buttons. There's no strange button combinations on, say, say on the Grundig satellite, Grundig Yacht Boy 500. Strange button combinations. There's none of that. So I really, really like that about this radio. Now, what I don't like about this radio, there's only a couple, to be honest. There's not much. First off is the memory. There's only 10. And honestly, with the radios these days, even the lower end ones have like 1,000 memories. 10 is not enough. But considering this is from the early 1980s, I guess I'll let it slide. Another thing that might be a big drawback is its selectivity. It's an old school radio, so obviously when, say, there's a really strong FM or AM station, it always bleeds through the weaker one. It happens all the time. Older radios, this is what happens. So if you're really serious about, filtering out, getting to the weaker stations, and you have like a local strong AM station around you, this is probably not ideal. However, everything other than that, this is a very intuitive radio, and I think it's a great radio for the beginners. Other things are just little pet peeves that, might be a flaw or might not. First up, it's a BFO. Some people want upper sideband, lower sideband for the SSB functions. The headphone jack is mono, and another thing is that this thing takes 6 AA batteries. Most radio could do with only 4. So, yeah, people might not be too happy about that. Well, that's it. Let's not waste any time and get into the testing, shall we? So, let's start from doing a quick sound check. Alright, so let's first take a listen at a stronger local AM station.
As problems that we can pick up and place in different places, which is fine so long as they're not technically being tortured. In addition to the moral costs, and I'm really grateful to Jeff for really highlighting the sort of human moral costs involved in these policies, it's also just a really costly policy. Offshore detention costs upwards of $800,000 per D.
To add out on to the cons list, something I don't like about this radio, the AM does not have a frequency selector, and it has quite a narrow filter. So take that to note if you are looking for a radio that has a frequency filter, different filter selections capabilities. This one does not. Now let's take a listen at a weaker AM station. This radio also does not have synchronous detection, so also keep that in mind if that is something that you want on your radio. So this is what I picked up now at 12:44 midnight, 4840 WWCR in Nashville, Tennessee.
On your own hours while working from home. So contact me, Jamel, by filling and I will get back to you personally and provide all the support you need to get started and build your longevity business. TeamG'day.com.
All right, this is Radio de Bongo from Europe. For reference sake, I'll compare it to the Texan PO990. This is Radio Marti, a strong shortwave station here in the U.S.
Yo estoy seguro, vamos, mira, te voy a poner un caso. España tiene este año elecciones generales y yo ya desde aquí anticipo que va a haber un cambio político, porque la situación económica española es mala, no es buena, pero es muchísimo mejor que la de Cuba y los españoles lo que quieren es vivir cada vez mejor. Y claro, se encuentran con un gobierno que no sabe gestionar, que es el gobierno comunista y socialista, que es un pacto que existe aquí en España. Bajen a un nivel de ministro de Economía y al láteres. La situación no es buena. Y yo estoy convencido de que si en Cuba hubiera un sistema democrático y una situación económica como la que hay, este gobierno acabaría cayendo. No tendría ninguna justificación de mantener a personas que son incapaces de gestionar los intereses del pueblo. Eso está clarísimo.
So that concludes today's review, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Anyways, just a little sum up. I feel like this is a really good radio for beginners if you could get it, say like $50, $60 without the need to do any repairs. However, that could sometimes be a little difficult, especially on eBay. A lot of times You know, when you buy these, you would have to replace the capacitors. This one is all through hole, so it's pretty easy to replace, and its capacitors issues aren't as severe as other Sony radios, say the ICF-SW55. So, if you want to give repairing radio, if you just got into repairing radio, you want to do something that's a little bit challenging but not too much, go for this. This is a very good radio in terms of its performance and user friendliness. And I also think this looks really cool, futuristic 80s look. So, hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you.